Hey guys, this is the Blonde Skeleton here. Welcome to another episode of the Boneyard. We're going to continue our build of our miniature cottage. The way the roof turned out was really neat. These really steep peaks and this deep curve on the roof gives it kind of an elven look. So I was really excited to do that. So with that in mind, we're going to actually create some windows and doors that will go along with this, and I'll show you that process in this video. So this episode is about windows and doors, and my dog's adorable little feet. That is also what this is about. Okay, so basically what you're going to need for this is, what I use for this is Super Sculpey Firm. The firm formula is, in my opinion, a lot easier to work with because you're able to get that detail out of it. You'll notice that these are all different colors. The white ones are the originals that I sculpted out of regular Sculpey, not the firm stuff. And then I made a mold, which I then cast these versions from, the gray ones, which are actually out of the firm Sculpey. The brown ones are, funny story, what happens when you leave them in the oven for an hour and a half. Sometimes I forget to turn things off. Makes my wife very, very happy when she comes down at 12:30 in the morning to find the oven on. So anyways, you're gonna need some of this. Also, we're gonna use my fancy handy dandy little sculpting texture tool. Another piece that we used for the shingles when we were making texture on the shingles. This thing is one of the most useful sculpting tools I've ever found. That's really good. And then, of course, an X-Acto knife to trim things up. Also going to keep some water around. This is soap water that I use just for cleaning my brushes. But I'm going to use that because it makes texturing a little bit easier. Kind of smooths things out a little bit, makes it a little bit less sticky. So let's go ahead and get to work. Okay, so first things first, we need to kind of establish the architectural style for our house, which, as I've said before, is going to be kind of an elven theme. So with that in mind, most elven architecture in fantasy has been represented as kind of an associated branch of the Art Nouveau movement, which is kind of a response to the Art Deco movement, which was present in the early modern era as kind of a very industrial, modern style with a lot of angles and geometric shapes. The Art Nouveau movement, by response to that, was a return to kind of natural forms, curves, and organic shapes and forms. So the Elvish style being Art Nouveau, the Dwarvish style is a little bit more Art Deco. So just a little trivia there for you. Because I want to make kind of an Art Nouveau style house with a little bit of that naturalistic kind of elvish quality to it, what I want to do is give it Gothic arch style doors, right? Just because those Gothic arches are used, that shape is used a lot in Art Nouveau. So I'm going to go with a Gothic arch shape. Now what I've done is I bought a pack of these, which are just little cookie cutters that you can get for Sculpey for making, these I think are specifically to make banners, but I thought, good God, these are the exact right size for doors and large windows as well as smaller windows. So I got a pack of these, and they're great for establishing kind of the baseline size of these things. So what I've done is I've taken it on a piece of chipboard and I just set it right in the corner and I trace it out on the inside. Okay. Then what I do is I just find the center point, put it about 1/4 of an inch above the top of the arch, and then connect it by hand, making these sort of Gothic style arches, which I'll use for my doors and windows. So I'm going to then cut these out and use those as a template when I roll out my clay. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these out and then roll out some clay and show you the next step. Okay, so I got my my little templates cut out, and I'm ready to kind of roll out my clay. Now, the first step that you want to do when you're working with any kind of clay is to condition it. And that means you're going to, warm it up in your hands, kind of work it with your hands, Sculpey, or pretty much any kind of like good sculpting clay, is going to be kind of dry and brittle, and you're going to be able to break it really easily. So the way to kind of condition it and get it ready to work is to kind of warm it up in your hands and just smash it. Okay, that friction as you smash it is going to warm it up a little bit more. You can get clay conditioners that will do the same thing. They're just big rolling machines. You can drop it in and turn a crank and it does all that work for you, but I like to do it by hand just because it's a nice little workout. Give you Popeye arms, you know what I mean? So we're going to continue to do this for just a moment. It doesn't take super long, but it does take a fair amount of just stamina and strength here. So we're going to keep doing this for just a minute. And here we go. Almost ready. It's getting there. Already it's getting softer. And kind of the core part of it is really still really stiff. So what you want to do is flatten it out with your fingers and then break it in half and fold it in on itself and just kind of really stir it around and mix it up so that it's nice and evenly consistent. And the consistency is really easy to work. The more you work with it with your hands, the softer it gets. So if you're looking to do like some hard details, you might want to just let it sit and cool down a little bit so that it holds those details a little bit better. But we're just about ready, so we're going to drop this here on our piece of parchment paper. I use parchment paper because it doesn't stick. When I just try to roll it out on this or even on the plastic acrylic surface that the rolling pin came with, it just sticks and it's a huge pain in the butt. So I just take my rolling pin on the parchment paper. I'm just gonna roll it out. Now we're just looking for a nice even thickness here. So you want to roll it one direction, then roll it out the other direction, just so you get rid of kind of those ripples that occur with kind of just uneven pressure as you go across the top of it. Okay, so that's about the right thickness. I go for doors and stuff, I try to go about 1/8 of an inch thick, just because that's going to give us a nice even thickness that's not too thick, but it's also not so thin that it's super brittle. So I'm just going to lay my template right on top of this. Find a spot where I can just do all three of them. You don't have to put all three of them on here at once, but I just like to do that so I can space it out. I'm going to take my X-Acto blade and I'm just going to cut around it. Now you'll see how much we have left over. It's a lot. I'm not pressing hard with the knife. I'm just going through the clay, because I don't want to cut through the parchment paper, obviously. But I'm just going through the clay and drawing the knife through it, so that it's cutting the clay, but not pressing it so that it's cutting the parchment, right? So the tricky part of this is making sure this doesn't wiggle around as you cut. So I'm putting my middle finger on this as I cut to just press it down. That keeps it from squirming around on you. I'm just going to cut all the way across here so I can peel this up when I'm done. And then this last one, notice I'm not clearing away the excess clay just yet, not until I get all three of these cut out. Just because when you move it around, it kind of deforms it a little bit. So you want to move it around as little as possible once you get your actual shape. So I'm just going to push on the templates and put pressure on them and just peel this up like so. Ta-da! And we have a lot of scraps that we can just continue adding details, and sometimes you may not cut all the way through, and that's okay. Yeah, just go back and fix it. Okay, here we go. So now, when I peel this off, we're going to have three ideally shaped bases for our doors. Okay? So, now because this is a cottage and not some sort of like fancy kind of castle or anything, these are going to be really simple wooden structures. Okay? So the first thing I want to do is kind of, if I want if I want one of these to be basically shutters, I think I'm going to use the small one as a shuttered window, and then the large one, of course, is going to be my door, and the one in the middle I'm gonna texture like a window. So so I'm going to take my fancy little X-Acto square here. It's just a piece of steel that's about a 32nd of an inch thick. It's really thin, but it's a good kind of metal straight edge that I can use for creating the planks in the door. And I'm just going to press it lightly into the door so that I can get nice straight planks. Now these lines are a good size because they're going to be just slightly bigger than the wood grain that I'm going to draw on it in just a moment. So they'll still be visible as planks even after I've textured it with the wood texturing brush. Okay. So then my next step is, whoops, that's not the texturing brush, that's this guy right here. So I'm going to take my texturing brush and I'm just going to brush down each of these planks. And I'm only going to go over it until I have the acceptable depth. Now I got to remember that I'm going to be making, that this is a positive mold. I'm going to be making a negative mold that I'm going to be casting all of my actual doors out of. So my original, I want those details to be a little bit deeper, okay? So I'm going to press just a little bit harder than I would want these to be. And I'm going to make these details just a little bit more pronounced than maybe I would if this was just a single piece for a single project, okay? But this stuff works really easily. It's nice and firm, so it holds this detail well. You will end up with some crumbs kind of hanging out on it as you do this process, because that's kind of the nature of the thing. But that's why we have the water. We dip this in the water just a little bit. You don't want it soaked, but you want to just kind of brush it over the top of this, and it's going to clean up some of those crumbs and keep those details nice and pronounced, rather than just kind of a muddy mess. Okay, so we'll do this on the last one. That's much better. Yeah, it's much cleaner. So, so as you do this, make sure you remember to add water. Just dip your tool in the water just a little bit. It's gonna make those details a lot cleaner. Okay. So I'm gonna do the same thing on the small one. I'm just gonna make some planks, probably just 3 since it's so small. My planks. Dip it in the water. Shake it off just a little bit. And then I'm going to draw my texture on this. Oop. This last plank is just a little small. Try and get it on the edge of the brush. Okay. So, so if you look closely, you can see that this is now quite textured. All right, so we now have 2 very lovely, you can ignore the water drops on there. We have 2 very lovely iron bars that we're going to put on there. Okay, so again, you'll see we have our little plate for our door handle. Okay, if you look at it from the side, you can kind of see that the door handle is 3-dimensional with a big ring in it.